So DC is retelling the origin of the Joker, and the ending to this particular comic is insane. Even though this is a multi-part series, it's crazy. So what this does is this really just picks up with the Joker running up on a woman named Sally coming out of her house, right? And he says, "I know how I look, but you've got to believe me. It's all because I love you. I got caught up in some really terrible things, so I could give you the life you deserve. I can fix this. Just wait for me, Sally. Wait for me." And then he just storms off, only for this woman's husband to come out. And when he refers to her as Jody, she's like, "I have no idea who this person is." Now, and so what this does is it picks up 6 months after the encounter. And what you get is this kind of almost inner monologue where it sort of goes back and forth. The reason for this is because you have the Joker who's putting on a kind of face paint to make himself look normal, right? To look like a regular human being, to cover up his bleached skin. But as he's talking with himself, he talks about how he was betrayed, that somebody in the gang had talked to the cops, to Batman, whoever, and you end up realizing he's looking at himself in the mirror, but he's seeing the Red Hood. Now, that's our first clue as to when this comic takes place, because don't worry, I'm not gonna leave you hanging, I'm gonna make it all make sense. So, at that point, you pick up with Commissioner Gordon. Now, Gordon is actually not a commissioner yet. He's really more of a detective. At the moment, you've basically got Commissioner McCloud, who's the one sort of running the show here. And what's really big is that they are on the hunt for Batman, which is our second clue as to when this takes place. And there's a little bit of back and forth between the commissioner and really Gordon himself, in the sense that he's being chastised, right? Your extremely late report on the Ace Chemical mess, it's basically a love letter to a vigilante. And that's what we're basically informed. This takes place almost immediately after Batman Zero Year. Now, I will explain that here in a second, but I do want to finish this little bit of a train that's going on, this conversation with Gordon and all that kind of stuff, because all it really shows is the nature of Commissioner Gordon in relation to the Gotham Police Department. As you guys can probably imagine, cops in Gotham City are pretty corrupt. And in fact, there's one guy that he's talking to named Manny, where he basically says, like, "You're a crooked cop." Right? Like, you have some really, really fancy stuff, which is way more than a police officer could afford on their salary in this city. Of course, a fight kind of breaks out between the two of them. And as Manny is walking by the commissioner's office, he comes out and the two of them basically agree they need to do something about Jim Gordon. Now, a lot of that goes into like the early stories, specifically New 52 Detective Comics, which focus on Commissioner Gordon, at least for the first few issues or so, and really highlighted the fact that he was a good guy in a city full of corrupt cops. So, of course, they wanted to snuff him out and get rid of him so that he doesn't really rock the boat and bring the whole like corruption racket just crashing down. Right now, to the discussion about Batman Zero Year. So one of the things to know is that when DC rebooted in 2011 with the New 52, the whole idea was to basically start from zero. With Batman, they kind of did, kind of didn't, but Batman Zero Year was the story of how Batman became Batman, right? The death of his family and the whole 9 yards. The kicker about all this is that we were introduced to a villain called the Red Hood. Now, this was built on an old story by a guy named Alan Moore called The Killing Joke, which was at one point the definitive story of the Joker, which is to say he was a guy who quit his job to become a full-time comedian. He failed. He had a wife and unborn child to support. He was caught up in a criminal racket. Basically, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. A fight broke out between him and Batman. He fell into the Ace Chemical vat and came out as the Joker, and the rest is history. That was the origin of his character for decades, right? Decades and decades, going up until Zero Year. And when Zero Year happened, it was really just like Joker was an unnamed guy. He was just a dude with a red hood on his head. And that was it. He led a whole like criminal organization, and eventually they tried to like destroy the city of Gotham and all kinds of crazy stuff. The point is, like, a fight breaks out between him and Batman. And just like in the old Killing Joke story, he falls into the Ace Chemical vat and is believed to be dead. He ends up coming out, and this takes place immediately after that, right? So this is kind of the answer to the question, what happened between the time that he fell into Ace Chemical and the time that he like full on becomes the Joker that everybody knows and loves, right? Hence the retelling of his origin here. And so what you do is you pick up with him in a bar, right? Where he's basically just kind of picking a fight. Now, the inner monologue that he's experiencing, basically the kind of speech that's in purple bubbles, whatever you want to call it, that is like his human side, his normal side. Then there's like the person he's becoming, going insane, basically being broken mentally, different things like that, kind of tying into the old mantra from The Killing Joke. all it takes is one bad day, that sort of thing. And so it's trying to bring him down and keep him from doing just like crazy things while he's literally just going off the rails. And so that's why the inner monologue that he has is telling him to like stop talking and goading on these bikers in this bar and to just like chill and calm down and relax, because all it's going to do is create problems. But the Joker himself eggs these guys on, right? Like they're talking about how like, you know, some guy was giving him a hard time and he was going to punch him out and the guy was going to wake up on the floor, and the Joker's like, actually he would have been fine, right? Because all you do is talk. You are all talk and no action, right? That kind of thing, just goading these guys on and on and on. And so of course, as this fight breaks out between these guys and they're just hauling off and they're punching the Joker and whatnot, that as they're stomping him, in a moment of distraction when somebody's like, hey, he's had enough, that you end up having like the Joker grab this bottle, smash it on the side of the countertop, and then just like slash one of these guys' throats with it, right? And then when that happens, this dude stops him, only for us to find out that it's Brian, specifically number 22. Now, the reason why this is important is because during the New 52 and in 0 Year, when you had the Red Hood gang, nobody used real names. They were all given numbers. The reason why is because if no one knew anybody else's name, then nobody had the upper hand on anybody else. Nobody could get caught. So that's where, if you go back and you watch The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger's Joker, and they're doing the whole bank heist, and they all play different roles, but no one really knows what each person's role is supposed to be, right? It's just, I do this, and then that's that. It's really predicated on this, right? Just give everybody a kind of compartmentalized role, and then go forward from there. Give people numbers, don't give them names, and it all plays out in a way that works. And it did. It actually worked fantastically well until Batman showed up and he was able to start deducing stuff. But more so than that, you end up having this guy who's just kind of watching the Joker, right? Like he's watching it all unfold. He will become important as time goes on, specifically once we get towards the end of this story. But in the midst of all this chaos and all this pandemonium, a guy, another dude, right? This white guy who saw everything unfold basically makes a phone call. And we end up finding out the person that he's calling is number 2, the second in command of the Joker's old Red Hood gang. Because what they realize is that now he's back. He was not the Joker at the time that he led the gang. He was just a dude. But like now the leader is basically back. And the reality here is that it challenges number 2's role for leadership. And so his idea is, we got to take this guy out. Like we literally got to kill this guy. Not only that, they've actually been changing up their names and seemingly operating in different capacities. We don't necessarily know how far it goes, and it really kind of requires us to sort of dive into really more haphazard guessing and hearsay than anything else. But it's one of these things where they've basically changed their name from the Red Hood gang to like the Black Hood gang, right? Like that's it, right? They literally change what their hoods look like. But there is going to be an instance where Batman's talking to Detective Gordon, and he's talking about how like it's the Black Hoods now, it was the Gray Hoods before, so on and so forth. And so seemingly these guys just may be changing their whole shtick like every single week, which is actually pretty smart because it may either be multiple games operating or simply just one. It's really kind of cool and a really smart way to throw off the cops. But of course, we know it really won't do a whole lot of good for Batman. More so than that, one of these guys or some of these guys end up orchestrating a heist. Batman basically shows up and then of course deals with these guys, you know, like they're busted and they're basically strung up and he beats them all up and that kind of thing. The stuff that Batman does, right? You know, it's just Batman stuff. But Jim Gordon shows up and the two of them kind of start talking, right? And that's when you get this really interesting conversation, right? Where Gordon basically says, I think that's it for the Black Hood gang. And then he says, maybe, but there were red masks last week and the gray ghosts the week before. Copycats and distractions. The Red Hood gang is still out there. They need to be our focus. So that's where things are a little murky, right? Is it just really copycats? Or is it potentially that the Red Hood gang is just changing their look and their appearance in order to look like they're a different gang and to throw everybody off their track? We don't necessarily know. And I don't really think that was a question that was answered during everything that was going on. But one of the other things that goes on here is that Jim Gordon goes as far as to say, great, we're battling copycat gangs. We just recovered from the Riddler. And now we have to possibly worry about some mildly corroded genius gang leader. Why can't these guys just go away and stay away? Now, that's kind of coming off the heels of the bit of the conversation they had where Batman considers the possibility that the Joker is actually alive, or at least as he knows him at this point, the leader of the Red Hood gang, because all Batman knows is that he fell into a vat at Ace Chemical. He has no idea what happened after that. But to Jim Gordon's response and his statement about the Riddler, once you got towards the end of Batman Zero Year, going into like Secret City and that kind of stuff, the Riddler launched this campaign to literally take over Gotham. And in fact, he did. If my memory serves me correctly, and if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, but if my memory serves me, the Riddler took over the city of Gotham and then just like started going through and shutting everything down. The only way to free Gotham, right, life being able to go back to normal, was to like solve a series of riddles. It was really cool. It was actually one of the coolest stories that you ever had with the Riddler itself. But in effect, yeah, he took over Gotham City, locked the whole place down. I want to say he flooded the city, but I can't remember if it was that story or the War of Jokes and Riddles where the Joker and the Riddler went to war with each other. Like, all these are stories that we've covered, right? You'll find a link to these in the Batman playlist at the end of the video. All this stuff is covered there. But still, like, I can't remember off the top of my head, right, exactly which one of those it was. The fact remains, like, the Riddler attacked the city of Gotham and almost won. That's kind of the reference here. And so what ends up going on is that at this point in time, the Joker has not fully become the Joker yet, which is to say, the guy who's obsessed with Batman, who's always trying to get Batman's attention and that kind of stuff. That's the reason why, as he's standing outside of a pizza place with Brian, the real name of the guy, you know, number 22, that as they're standing outside this place, he sees Batman swoop overhead. Now, Batman doesn't know that this is the guy he's hunting for or anything like that, just doesn't really even notice him. But as soon as that happens, he takes off running. He immediately books it, and he ends up getting out to basically the Gotham Reservoir, right, over by the old Ace Chemical lab. And once he's there, you get the kind of iconic scene. It's the one that so many of you guys have probably seen, but you didn't know the context of if you never read The Killing Joke. But it's the one where like the Joker is just like, he's got his hands in his hair and he's looking down at the water and he sees his reflection as like a pale face and he's like going insane with the ha-has in the background. In this instance, it's a little bit different. That instead, what you end up seeing here is the Joker's reflection of his normal self. Of course, it's symbolic, but it's him looking at his normal self. And symbolically, he strangles that version of his normal self. In effect, he's killing off what little bit of humanity remained inside of him after everything in Ace Chemical. And he even says, like, you don't understand, I'm chaos, and just kind of laughs to himself. But this person comes out of nowhere and says, chaos that fears isn't really chaos at all, right? Chaos is, in and of itself, fearless, right? And this guy says, I've been following you for months and I'm impressed. I don't impress easily. And when Joker asks who you are, he says, I'm the man who can teach you how to harness your mind and to never feel fear again, to be the greatest force this world has ever known. And when Joker asks a question like, what makes you think you're qualified to do that? He says, because I'm the smartest man in the world and I trained Batman, right? So to the ending of this, there is a side story that goes on here. We don't know exactly when it takes place. At least I don't know exactly when it takes place, because last we left in the Batman comics, like this whole story, this origin is being told to Batman by the Joker in a prison cell, right? So that's really it. But this whole secondary story centers on the idea that like the Joker's been captured, and Batman gives this kind of monologue, right? So again, this is not tied into what we just talked about. This is something separate. And he says, we couldn't solve the Joker, so we locked him away in Arkham, hooked up to a machine. It was Barbara's idea after she became commissioner. So seemingly this takes place long into the future, right? Like at some distant point in the future. And he says, where in his mind, he was still going, still fighting, still trying to one-up me, more humane than that monster deserved. Except I made sure, even in his wildest imagination, that I always won. But an Arkham doctor was too tempted. He wanted to study the most malevolent and brilliant mind to ever exist. And so, of course, the Joker basically escaped, killed the doctor, and left a note that said, I'll see you soon. And so following that, we pick up with Batman where he says, the Red Hood, whether it's just one or more, he's calling me to where it all started. I don't have any choice. And he knows it, right? The Joker makes this comment where he says, you always follow me like a lovesick puppy, condemn me to dreams, and you'll soon find yourself there in darkness. And so Batman just kind of says to himself, it was the last thing he said to me, and he was right. And now the whole situation is a nightmare of darkness. Somewhere in the city, Duke is infected, and his powers are absorbing all the light, plunging Gotham into eternal night. They're all gone. I'm alone, so alone. Everyone's infected. An audible virus spread by laughter. And now the world is the Joker, right? Literally, this ends with this revelation that the Joker virus is like a zombie virus. Everybody in the world, every single human being is now the Joker, which I gotta be honest with you guys, man, I am liking and enjoying this new retelling of the Joker's origin. This is the story I wanna see, man. This is the one that I wanna read. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you need to get caught up on all the Batman stuff that we've talked about, make sure you click this link to the playlist, and I will catch you all later. Peace.